With Destiny 2 on the horizon, I've been tweeting about the game a lot, and every time I do, I see a bunch of folks who missed out on Destiny 1 asking what this series is, and if they should check out the sequel if they never played the first game in the series. This video will hopefully answer some of their questions, providing a baseline level of detail about what this series is about, so that you can make a decision either way if it sounds like something you'd enjoy. If you're already a Destiny player, this video is probably not for you. At its core, Destiny is a shooter RPG series from Bungie, the developer that created Halo, and even if you've never played the first Destiny, if you've played Halo, you'll probably find the core gunplay in Destiny really familiar. Stacked on top of that familiar gunplay is a suite of abilities that differ between the game's three classes, Titan, Warlock, and Hunter, and differs even further depending on which subclass of those three roles you decide to play as. Each class's powers are tied to their unique melee attacks, grenades, jumps, passive modifiers, and super abilities. One character's melee ability might allow them to toss an explosive throwing knife when its cooldown is finished, while another might allow that character to build a damage-absorbing shield around themselves when they get a melee kill. One class's super ability lets them fire an enormous bolt of dark energy into a crowd of enemies, while another gives them a powerful electrified melee attack they can use to clean out a whole room. It's a really neat way of utilizing the stuff that all shooters have and turning them into these points of differentiation between players. The three classes in Destiny 2 are the same as the classes in Destiny 1, but there's some swapped out subclasses this time around. Titans are an armor-oriented class designed to get up close and personal with enemies and set up supports for their friends. The two announced subclasses in Destiny 2 for Titans are the Striker, which focuses on arc or electric damage, and has a bunch of abilities, giving them increased potency when rushing into a battle, and the Sentinel, which uses void damage and is all about defending themselves and teammates with their various abilities. Destiny 2 introduces a unique class power shared across subclasses, and for Titans, it's a personal barricade you can deploy to give your fire team some much-needed cover in a fight. Warlocks focus on the recovery stat, which determines how quickly you can recover health after taking damage in a fight, and they're all about dealing huge amounts of ability-based damage. Their two known subclasses are the Dawnblade, a solar damage subclass that's great at taking out enemies while flying through the air or dealing damage over time from the ground, and the Voidwalker, a void damage subclass with some really neat mechanics that allow you to consume energy from one of your abilities to power up another. The Warlock class power allows them to drop a field on the ground that can either heal teammates or boost their weapon damage temporarily. Hunters are all about speed, regardless of which subclass you choose. The Gunslinger is a solar damage class that has some mechanics that reward accuracy, and a super that gives you an extremely powerful golden gun for a short period of time. The ARCSTRIDER is an arc damage class designed for melee-heavy builds, giving the Hunter tools to dash into the fray, stab some enemies, and dash away quickly using an electrified staff as their super. Both Hunter subclasses have the ability to dodge, and they can further boost that ability with other passive perks. Now, it's worth mentioning that currently it's rumored that each class will also have a third subclass to choose from, as was the case in Destiny 1, and that those additional subclasses will actually be returning subclasses from one of Destiny's expansions. For the Titan, that means the Sunbreaker, a solar damage class with a super that lets the Titan toss explosive hammers. For the Warlock, it's the Stormcaller, an arc damage subclass with a roaming super that turns them basically into Lord Palpatine. And for Hunters, it's the Night Stalker, a void damage subclass with some neat utilities including stealth powers and an enemy tethering bow. Once you choose a class, you can switch between its subclasses at will, once you've unlocked them while playing Destiny's story missions. But the decision of which class to play is permanent, so you should take your time and think about how you like to play the game before you make a call. Destiny 2 features multiple character slots, so you can always start an ult if you want to see how the other thirds live. Once you start the game, you'll probably spend most of your time doing Destiny 2's story missions, which follows the collapse of Earth's last great city under assault by an alien faction called the Cabal. The question I get most often about Destiny 2 is, do I need to know about the story of Destiny 1 to enjoy its sequel? My answer is probably not. Bungie has been forthcoming about the fact that a lot of the story beats in Destiny 1, which, to be fair, were not in any way a huge emphasis in that first title, won't be so important in the sequel. If you're worried that you'll be lost in this unfamiliar world, though, there's a lot of great videos and other resources online that help break down what this universe is all about. As a guardian for the Fallen City, you'll be tasked with rebuilding humanity's footholds against the Cabal. Most of that exposition will happen in the aforementioned story missions, which you can play solo or in a fire team of 3 players, the limit on most of the game's PvE activities. Other PvE activities include strikes, which could be compared to instanced dungeons and other MMOs, patrol missions, which are based around dynamic events and exploration in the game's expansive planetary environments, and raids, which necessitate 6 guardians to work together to complete some of the game's most demanding activities. Players who want to take on other players in PvP activities can do so in the Crucible, which offers several different game modes and challenge categories, and most of the time puts players on an even playing field gear-wise, so that stronger guardians don't have a mechanical advantage against their weaker opponents. In addition to progressing through the story, your Guardian will increase in level, earning new abilities for their subclasses as they go. They'll also earn new loot in the form of weapons and armor, and will find countless aesthetic customization options like new ships, color-changing armor shaders, and other gear as they play. Weapons and armor in Destiny 1 had a metric called light, which contributes to each Guardian's average light level. This is a bit complicated, but in addition to your player level, which is fairly easy to reach the cap of, light level is the real measurement of how ready you are to take on certain activities. This is where the loot grind comes into play. A Guardian at max light level is going to be much more effective in an in-game activity than a Guardian 50 levels lower. In order to boost that rating up, you'll have to find and purchase gear with a higher light level to raise your average, which will unlock more difficult and more rewarding activities as you go. In Destiny 2, that measurement is still there, but it's just called power. Loot can be purchased from vendors for various currencies, gained after earning reputation with certain factions, and rewarded at the end of activities and quest lines. Most of it, though, comes from engrams, which are dropped by enemies and found in chests throughout the game and can be decrypted into gear back in the game's social hub. Engrams have different rarity categories. A legendary engram will reward a legendary or higher tier piece of gear, and so on. Players can equip 3 weapons at a time, and those 3 categories have changed dramatically from the first Destiny. In Destiny 2, you can use a kinetic weapon, an energy weapon, and a power weapon. The first 2 categories feature the same types of guns: auto rifles, hand cannons, submachine guns, and a few others, though energy weapons can deal elemental damage of the game's 3 types: Arc, Solar, and Void. Some powerful enemies have shields that correspond to those 3 types. If you can pop that shield with a weapon or ability matching the damage type, you'll cause a huge explosion that'll deal tons of damage to all enemies surrounding that shielded foe. Power weapons have different types of guns though, things like shotguns, sniper rifles, rocket launchers, and swords. Ammo for these are much rarer than the other 2 slots, but will reliably drop from more powerful enemies, making them more of a priority whenever they pop out of a crowd of lower level mobs. Guardians also have a bunch of different armor slots, and each piece of armor has varying stat bonuses and passive perks to unlock and choose between. There's also a few other miscellaneous pieces of leveled gear, like shells for your Ghost, a floating AI companion that used to be voiced by Peter Dinklage, but when the Taken King expansion for Destiny 1 launched, Nolan North took over voicing that role. In addition to these different gear categories, you can also find unique exotic weapons and armor, which have some of the most powerful passive abilities in the game, abilities that go a long way to determine your playstyle. These pieces of gear really stand apart from non-exotic drops. Icebreaker was a sniper with a recharging ammo clip. Thorn was a hand cannon that dealt damage over time. The Empyrean Bellicose helmet let you fire while stationary in the air. Ruin Wings boosted heavy ammo drops, and so on. There were tons of exotics to collect in Destiny 1, and some of those it looks like will return in Destiny 2 alongside a slate of new exotics. However, you can only have 1 exotic weapon and 1 exotic piece of armor equipped at any given time, making this one of the more important build decisions you can make. While Destiny has a story you can play through, hunting down better and better gear really is the long tail of this game, the pursuit that you'll spend most of your in-game time on. And really, the loops that you'll follow to get that gear is the heart and soul of the Destiny experience. Some activities like raids or the challenging Nightfall strikes offer really great gear, but you can only receive those drops from those activities once a week per character. The rest of the time you can try to hunt down drops in public events, or in strike playlists, or PvP activities, or any special events that might be happening, or any number of other sources. To really get a feel for Destiny is to understand how those reward loops function, and while there's too much to get into in this basic primer video, it seems like in Destiny 2 there's going to be no shortage of activities for you to do solo, or with friends, or with a match-made group of other players, activities that you can do to stay on your grind. And really, that's the biggest determining factor of whether or not Destiny is a good recommendation for someone who's never played before. If you ever got swept up in similar progression cycles in games like World of Warcraft or Diablo, there's a somewhat similar DNA to how Destiny operates. It's not entirely a mindless grind. The core gameplay of Destiny is, in my opinion, pretty fun, enough so to keep you hooked for the dozens or even hundreds of hours that you'll spend pursuing that end-game progression. If the idea of repeating activities in pursuit of incrementally better gear or the occasional exotic drop doesn't sound like your cup of tea, those loops probably won't be as compelling for you, although maybe your first playthrough of Destiny 1 or 2 will make it worth the price of admission. But that's the core of Destiny, and while there's a slight learning curve involved in understanding how those systems work, it's a fairly accessible climb. If you skip to Destiny 1 and that core gameplay sounds good to you, I think you'll probably still enjoy Destiny 2 even without the institutional knowledge from Destiny 1. But again, there's lots of ways to read up on the world of Destiny without having to play through that first game. Basically, there's a few different alien factions and you're going to shoot them a lot. Sometimes your Ghost will hack a computer. Maybe that's reductive, but it's also not that reductive. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for lots of videos from us on Destiny 2, which drops on Xbox One and PS4 on September 6th, and on PCs through Battle.net on October 24th.